Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 643. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, Caleb Woods, CEO and Senior Software Craftsman at RoleModel Software, joins the podcast. Caleb and I talk about the role of craftsmanship in developing and maintaining software, or really any other product in the whole world. This is an extensible topic. Caleb Woods is a proven leader with extensive experience evaluating technology trends, leading teams, and implementing best practices. As CEO, Caleb promotes continuous improvement while cultivating a collaborative work environment. Caleb is a technologist who understands and solves complex business problems. He has a passion for software craftsmanship and producing sustainable software, and has become the visionary leader of the next generation of RoleModel Software. Caleb also applies the ideas of continuous improvement to his personal life through effective micro-habits and is a big believer in intermittent fasting. He also, by the way, we talked about that on the podcast. He also enjoys playing disc golf, cycling, and watching Michigan State football. We won't hold that against him here in Ohio, and basketball. He and his wife, Kimberly, have 3 young kids. Are you ready to talk craftsmanship? It's time for the interview. Caleb Woods, CTO and Software Craftsman at RoleModel Software. Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on.
I am excited. Software Craftsman, CTO, in an Agile world. What is that role?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I can look at CTO, software craftsman. They're both really around kind of marrying the business side of the problem-solving domain into software. And I really look at a lot of what I do is solving business problems with the context of software. So the company I work for, RoleModel Software, we're a custom software consultancy. So a lot of it is customers coming to us with business process scaling or opportunities they have within their business. They've got an understanding or expertise in their business, but not that software development team to build that out. So a lot of my role is marrying that from, the initial conversations with customers into how do we organize the team around that particular project or opportunity. And then also, kind of the CTO role. I mean, it's a little bit of what's the delivery, operational kind of that side of things, but also what's the trend? How can we incorporate the software tools into our process such that, we're effectively delivering value? Custom software.
I vaguely remember custom software. Doesn't everybody just do packages today?
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, we would like to see that, people can still do that. I mean, it's one of the biggest things that you see maybe as objections to custom software is, well, can I just buy a SaaS? I see everyone else in my industry can just go buy this tool off the shelf, spend $50 a month. Why isn't that what custom software solves or costs in that regard either? And really, that is the ultimate. When it does exist, then yes, you should go for that. You should find those solutions. But often there's what's unique about that process or your secret sauce as a business or an organization or expertise that an individual or a team has that they're trying to scale in a unique way. That's the pieces where we see custom software really comes into play.
I think people forget that when they are talking, whether it's a CRM system or something else, and they go off and they say, well, everybody's using this one over here or that one over there, that leaves them no, other than maybe some weird configurations, it leaves them no avenue for uniqueness. Do people get that as a conversation, or do they have an expectation that they can solve all of their problems without doing custom?
There definitely is a bit of that, and I think you almost get into those kind of packages like those big CRMs or ERPs or something around a unique business process. We often work with owners in small to mid-market companies, and in that stage, they look at and they're not unaccustomed to spending multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest into things that are going to enable them to do new things in their business. But at the same time, they're not really that excited about, let me spend 6 figures plus about licensing for a package of software that I have to customize and then I don't really own or control. If something happens with this company or the direction that it's going, I lose my ability to say, but this is something unique about our process that I'd like to add in, and I don't really have an avenue for that. And so being able to provide that for people when they switch from sort of the cost mindset into the investment mindset. And once you start to view custom software as an investment, that's where I think the real possibilities come in play. And now it's what's the risks involved? What's the potential that comes out of this? And there's always going to be some of those things. But if it's purely a cost thing, custom software very rarely makes sense unless it's a special case.
How can code be an investment? I've heard it described recently as a liability. I thought that was sort of an interesting approach. It made me feel like I have created lots of liabilities for people over my career. So excellent, might as well. But how can it be an investment?
Well, really, we look at it as an asset. It's producing something of value over time. You put money into it. I mean, we're all familiar with the technical debt analogy, which is, I think apt, but also, really what we're building is a baseline of value that's being added back into the organization that's using that software. Often we look at custom software that can be used to help a company scale from either scale revenue, reduce costs, and do that without growing people. You're becoming the extension of the experts that exist in the organization to be able to do that. And almost every organization looks at those people as assets. And so when software allows you to expand the capabilities of what those people are doing, I think you should look at it just like any other capital investment where you would purchase an asset in that way.
RoleModel, did you bootstrap as an Agile organization? How did that work in your organization?
Yeah, so when RoleModel was founded in 1997, Ken Auer, who was our founder, was a part of the group getting really started with the Agile and XP movement. Him and Roy Miller, two guys on the team, wrote one of the Agile Explained or XP Explained, one of the books in the series there that Kent Beck and others most highlight. One of the other purple cover books. And so for us, it's been for us, it's been one of those things where start from the beginning, and we almost describe it as Agile in an Agile way. I personally look at it as I love seeing Agile described as lowercase a Agile, whereas uppercase Agile gets into you just mean Scrum and ceremonies and all these things that, no, that's not really adapting to change, feedback loops. How do we incorporate that into a lot of those extreme programming concepts into the way that we run the business and the way we interact with our customers and collaborate?
Could you do Agile, at least from software development, without at least some of extreme? I mean, could you just do Scrum and be Agile?
I mean, I guess to some extent, but I mean, they go so hand to hand that to me, I look at it as, it's the outside feedback loops that Agile may be. And really, extreme programming is just moving that closer and closer to the minute by minute, the hour by hour, the feedback you need from your test suite and pairing. Yeah, to me, you want it to be the core of what you're doing in the decision-making process. So if it's not boiling down, I think you're losing so much of the value from it.
The world is a strange place. You see people just trying to do that half, right? And I pick on Scrum, and Scrum's perfectly fine. I'm a Scrum Master. I have that on my license plate somewhere. But without the technical side, I do think they miss the boat, right? It's just a replacement for a whole bunch of PMI minted project managers. How do you see, as a leader, right, as a C-level executive in an organization, how do you see little a Agile sort of changing over the time that you've been there, and where do you see it going in your organization in the next few years?
Yeah, so a big part of the way that we've adopted our business, we've actually incorporated a business system called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And that's been one of the ways that Agile's been able to flow into our business. It operates in a very similar way because it thinks about things in defined cadences. So we're looking at a 10-year, focusing on core values, a 10-year target for where the business is going, a 3-year picture of where we get there, walking ourselves backwards until we get down to okay, what's our goals for the year, our rocks for the quarter, these big things that we want to move forward. And then, the issues that we need to address on a weekly basis. But so it's giving you some of that focus for where are we going, but not trying to prescribe that what's the path that we get there, and recognizing that we have to change as we go through that. So I think that's been one of the aspects that we've adopted most in the last, it's really been about 5 years as we've kind of brought that into the organization. We acted that way in general, but this has kind of given us a more formal framework to think about how Agile applies in the organization.
How does that boil down to the person writing code? I mean, so you have that grand vision down to the rocks that you're moving this quarter. How does that actually boil down to somebody who actually is writing code?
We try to do we try to connect those dots as much as we can, right? What does it look like when you are working on a project? How do you contribute to some of those rocks? Because a lot of those are, engagement for our customers, or how are we delivering on the projects that we have on the horizon for us? Or, what are the longer term goals that we're trying to improve as we try to get better at design integration into the work we're doing, or up our game and, bringing on some new people? What are those things that you can do and be a part of? And how does your contribution affect those targets for this quarter, and how can you be involved? So really trying to put that in front of people. And one of the big things we do as an organization, we call it we have a weekly lunch and learn we call Chow and Powwow. So it's, lightning talks, sharing things, from the leadership team of what's going on, what are we doing, but trying to really give that feedback loop such that on a weekly basis, they're, learning from other individuals in the company, or hearing stuff from the leadership team, or a combination of the both, that we can really be both building those relationships and sharing that information. And it really comes down to how can we communicate more and more about these things to keep them front of mind.
How is that working in the late 2020 environment where not everybody is always in the office?
Yeah, so we've been a organization that's kind of mixed. We've got about 50% of our team in the Raleigh area of North Carolina, and then we've got folks in a few different remote places across kind of the Eastern and Central time zones. And so for us, it's not been too big of a shift. We've been, kind of had these mixed in-person and virtual meetings. We've definitely had to shift to more of, we moved to being 100% remote team for a portion of the year where nobody was in the office. And we've just really tried to invest in what's that experience like, because we've been doing this, working that way with kind of a mixed group in one location and some remote for about 5 years. And there's definitely things that are missed. Like, how do you advocate for those folks that are remote, that they can, audio's coming through clearly? How can we invest in, mic and audio setup so that, they are able to jump in and collaborate well? We do things like, 360 video in our conference room so that people actually get a sense of what it's like to be in the room. And it's not just, oh yeah, we've got a webcam over in the corner that you can kind of see how you're participating. No, how do you get the facial reactions and some of those other things? And then, some of that has been moving more towards just more people being remote has actually worked pretty well for us this year. There are a lot of things that are easier or maybe more valuable when you can have everybody remote or everybody in person. So we'll look forward to being able to get back to having some more of our group, get everybody together, collaboration in 2021. But it's been good progress we've been able to make virtually this year.
Over my career, having been in the custom world in many times, one of the things that always struck me was that whether I was internal or external, you'd be sitting at your desk, minding your own business, as everybody's always minding their own business, right, at their desk. And so, a client or a stakeholder or somebody would walk up and they would have a perfectly formed idea of what they wanted, and they would have every expectation that this was
perfect
McDonald's,
spec.
right? That they could just tell me exactly what they wanted, and that I could just 3 burgers and a side of fries to go with it, and they'd have it instantaneously. Obviously, I don't think that, because I'm poking a lot of fun at it, I don't think that ever worked out quite well. How do you deal with people, and I'm sure you probably have run into a few of those, who think they know exactly what they want and it will tell you how to do it?
Yeah, and thankfully that's not been the lion's share of the cases, that you've got. There definitely is the value of somebody's coming with a spec and, here's the research we've tried to done, we're trying to get it down to, what's the lowest cost we can get into this. And what we've tried to kind of push back into that is our iterative process and approach to that. We want to get to value early, but that means that just recognizing out of the gate from experience and years of custom software, it doesn't matter how good your spec is, it's not right. If we built exactly what you wanted, when we got to the end, you'd say that wasn't what I wanted. It's that feedback loop of actually seeing working software that's really important. So when we get started with a project, one of the things that we want to focus on, we call this our explore phase, but it's around looking at technical exploration. What are the things that are going to bite us? Integrations or other pieces down the road that we need to de-risk early in the process. How can we cast vision for UX workflows and vision of where this tool might go, whether that's the initial MVP or later releases we want to get to. And then how can we build a walking skeleton? And this is one of the key parts to me is when you get it into a place where you actually are putting working software that solves their real problem in the hands of those users to see how that works. So we've tried to really focus on how do we get to that place as fast as possible. And sometimes that means, we're going to mock out some things like standard user authentication that we know exactly how that's going to plug in, but we're not going to focus on building that in the first 2-3 weeks of the project because we want to get something into the hands of those users in the first 2-3 days, a week, where they start to interact and see how we're building up the solution that they get to. And then we can actually build a roadmap where we're, small increments of value. At what point can we say, okay, we're done? And we could release, because no software is ever done. It's just we say we're done for now. We're going to release it and go into support mode. So that's really how we've tried to work through that. And what's really been cool to see is even those customers that do come with us with that detailed spec, saying, here I think here's all the things that go into that. As we're able to go through the process, they see how quickly that we implement those things and reflect the vision of where they want to go, and also uncover all the holes that they see. And I think because we're able to both build confidence and expose those holes early on, it gets us into the right sort of collaborative experience where now we're solving problems together as a unified team and not just, all right, throw it over the wall and here's what you get from that spec.
So you use the term de-risk. Has de-risking always been a part of your approach, or is that something that was learned along the way?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. All custom software, is informed by, experience. And so I would even say some of those things that I was mentioning that we kind of step out or try to abstract away of, let's not focus on in some of those early phases, are things that, depending on the person or the point in time, the organization or the technologies, would have been a risk. Often I look at when you get started with a new project, we try to continually be improving our technology stack, looking for, what's an experiment that we can be trying within this project? Is there something new from the way we approach it? Something new we're bringing in from a technology standpoint? Something we want to focus for, again, part of that bigger feedback loop. Trying to de-risk that early, just recognizing what's standard and what's not. At the same time, realizing that there are going to be things that come up that we don't foresee. And so we're trying to build some of that contingency into the project as well.
Do you think that's an approach that only works when you're building custom software, brand new, greenfield, those sorts of things? Or is that something, that whole idea of de-risking experiments, thinking about experiments, is something that you would say, hey, brand new, newly minted developer or group of developers inside of an organization that are mainly doing enhancements and things like that. Is that something that they ought to consider?
I think so. I mean, in a lot of ways, we even think about this concept as we're adding features to a product and to an existing system. Because once you get that base going, then you're still into that. It's just a smaller scale version of that same thing. And so a few years ago, came up with the acronym BRAVE to think about this. So brainstorm. What's the solution? What are we being asked to do? What could we do there? And then the R is reflect, because often just because we talked about something doesn't mean we got it. What's your learning style? What's your communication style? Are you a visual thinker? As we talk about it, does that really make it clear? Or there's kind of the classic picture of we're talking about a concept and I've got a square over my head and you're thinking triangle. Do we understand each other? So can we reflect that in another medium? And then when we're talking about reflecting, what are we reflecting? Well, what's an approach? How do we think we could tackle this work? And so if we're collaborating on that by reflecting about it, that's a big part of it. Value. What's the business value that's driving what we're doing? If we get down to the business value, that allows us to be creative in our problem solving. Because it's not, you asked me to put a modal over here to do this thing, but why? And if we get to that why, that's so much more than often the collaboration between the development team and the business. There's folks on the business that are trying to drive value that have less understanding of the software side, and there's folks on the software side that have less understanding of the business. And so we're trying to get a shared playing field where we can work. And if that's business value, then that's a big part of it. And then another piece of it, I'm not a huge fan of estimates, but estimates is in there from what's just our guardrails around this? How big do we think this is? Because often I feel like that's a de-risking case of, do we think this is a half-day thing? Do we think this is a 2-3 day thing? If we think it is, how can we validate throughout the process that, there's something we discovered that blows that up, changes that perspective, and bring that back into focus so that we can kind of go back and say, is this still match the value that we were trying to think about? And so from that perspective, I mean, whether it's brand new product where we're trying to answer that for the entire ecosystem, the MVP, or it's what are these set of features that we're trying to add in this next sprint? I think really thinking about those things is key and adds value as you're de-risking what's there.
As someone who relatively recently in his career has become an executive, yeah, you have that C tattooed on you somewhere. Once that's happened, what's been the biggest surprise that you've learned moving up the hierarchy?
I think one that's been interesting for me, just like from a development perspective, coming into a developer, looking at how decisions are made. There's always this, you would almost say a little bit of animosity or not understanding of why is this decision being made? It doesn't seem like it matches with where we're trying to go, because it's not just about the technology. And I don't feel like that was that big of a divide for me, but the more being in that C-level seat and interacting with other folks as decision makers in other companies, just seeing how much that plays into it. It's not so much, the technology is very rarely the decision about why you do custom software. It's what's the business opportunity, what are the risks involved, how much is the relationship and trust around those things tie in. And so I think those are focusing on growing in those areas. For me, the change has been, as I started my technical career, it was what technical books can I consume? What are the things from Martin Fowler and Kent Beck and those kind of guys that I can read and understand and digest? And those are great books, great resources, great things to learn. And then as I've kind of moved into that C-level, it's been, what are the business books? What are the other experiments, just other things that I can bring into play that really grow that depth of understanding? How can I grow as a coach and a mentor? That's a big part of our culture. But those are the things that become the enablers. Technology expertise is the limiting factor in career growth to a certain point, and then it's it's the other intangibles that become the next growth area.
Caleb, if you woke up tomorrow morning, somebody handed you a cup of coffee, a magic wand, if you don't do coffee, whatever the caffeinated beverage of choice is, what two things would you use your magic wand to change that impact software development?
So I think one of them you kind of brought up earlier in our conversation, talking about specs. I'd love to change the focus from what's the spec of what we're trying to get to what's the point on the horizon. What are we trying to enable? How can we shift that conversation so that that's the place that we're focusing on? And I recognize there's a level of detail, as one involved with trying to put together proposals for, how we would estimate and ballpark a project. You got to count the costs of what's involved. And so I recognize the value there. You got to add some detail, but so much more to focus on what's the small steps we can take in that process to get there. And the other, I think, is kind of in line with that, switching from that focus on pure cost, and sometimes cost in the, what is this costing me for this person for this hour, to what is the actual return on investment and what's the opportunity that I'm missing here. What's the value of getting the right person or the right team collaborating on this project? Yes, maybe it's a greater dollar amount in this 1 month period, but you got farther in that month than you got in 6 or 8 trying to go offshore or whatever, alternate option you're trying to look at, from looking at things purely at that cost number.
Excellent advice. Caleb, this has been marvelous. Caleb, if people wanted to continue the conversation, wanted to find out more about your organization, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, definitely. You can reach out to me personally. My personal site, calebwoods.com, have some of the technical posts I've written over the years, and got some of my contact information that's there as well. And then our company, RoleModel Software, you can find at rolemodelsoftware.com, and would be happy to have folks reach out and kind of continue the conversation of how we might be able to help, or just to talk about advice around custom software projects. A lot of the things that I look at, consulting is fun because we just get to learn about so many new businesses and domains. So welcome the opportunity to have some of those initial conversations and see where it might be a fit, or just be able to share some advice.
Caleb, I think, as you know, at the end here, I open up the platform for you to promote anything you like. So platform's yours.
One of the things that I've really been into over the last several years has been intermittent fasting, actually. So that's kind of been a life-changing thing for me over the last 3.5 years. I was at kind of a stage where borderline, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, those kind of things, and looking at, what's a sustainable way I can really make lasting change from a health perspective. And so intermittent fasting has been really interesting as just an enabling factor of, just clarity in work, kind of getting into, I often do like these 24-hour fasts, which are really like from dinner of one day to dinner of the next, which sounds like a lot and is something that I would have thought about when I first got started. But it's just really cool, just like over a long period of time, the changes that makes, the consistency that brings, and sustainable. It was something that I could do without saying, all right, how do I completely change the way I interact with dinner with the family? We can still eat a normal, healthy dinner as a family, but yet, doing these other things to kind of incorporate better mental clarity and better performance all around. So that's been a big one for me. Wow. And it's something I'm really passionate about talking about. So thanks for the opportunity to plug that a little bit.
Wicked cool. This has been marvelous. Thank you very much for sharing with the Software Process and Measurement Cast listeners, and hope to see you again.
All right. Thanks again, Tom.
The Software Process and Measurement Cast is the proud media sponsor of the first global Scrum Master Summit. Coming on May 17th, 2021. It's a combination of live and recorded events organized by the Scrum Master Toolbox. Link in the show notes. Be there. We're also the proud media sponsor of the annual DevOps Online Summit. This year, the DevOps Online Summit is April 26th through 30th. Link in the show notes to grab a ticket. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the chat on both of these. In Reread Saturday News, this week we reread Chapter 6 of Fixing Your Scrum, Practical Solutions to Common Scrum Problems by Ryan Ripley and Todd Miller. This chapter discusses some of the anti-patterns for the second role in Scrum, the development team. Those are the people who actually get the stuff done. If you haven't bought your copy of the book, use the link in the show notes and read along. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, we will revisit the topic of teams and what constitutes a team. Putting 6 people together, in person or virtually, and assigning a manager does not a team make. We've really got to get this right if we're going to get work done effectively and efficiently. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?